Hello and welcome once again to another episode of the Scrumcast over at HandCannonOnline.com, where I know everyone was missing the Goris, but they weren't missing much. With me, as usual, is Fraser Belfort, DeffHeadDice on the forums and all things social media. Welcome.
Hello all.
Hello, hello. And with us this week, as you've seen the last couple of times on those installments of the Scrumcast, we've got Devon, Cutthroat Cure on the forums. Welcome.
Hey guys.
As you can see, he's licking his paintbrushes, which means he's probably ingesting toxic chemicals. I'm kidding, just little pieces of plastic in acrylic paint. Well, gentlemen, I've come back from the dead, a very short stay in Hades, or with Hades rather, and I'm back to talk about trolls, as we do. So, procedurally, as we go, we're going to go ahead and roll into the news. Now, the most exciting thing we've got for you this week, as with many weeks, is going to be the battle reporting tool. Take it away, Fraser.
Yeah, so we continue to get games coming in, and once again, troll players are kicking the ass of all the other factions for number of reported games. So I thank you everyone who's listening who's putting those games or those reports in. So we are over 2,000. I think we're at 2,100 games reported. We're just really beginning to see some good data on the trolls. I'm going to actually try to aim to post some stuff after this, when this in time for when this cast is published through the regular process. And we're also a quick update. I've gotten an update on our first build of the tool. We're actually getting an Android app build to capture some of this information as well. So I've got the initial build for that to take a look at. So we may be reaching out for some pilot people to be able to submit your games as well. But keep the games coming in, and more importantly, get your opponents to put their games in as well. So, because right now I think the trolls represent about 25% of all games reported, and the next one is Kador at like 15 or 12%. So get all your friends to put their games in as well. And remember, you can always grab the data, the links in the comment section, or in the description section as well, in the show notes. You can always grab the raw data and take a look at it yourself if you want to slice and dice it and see how the different factions are working out.
Yeah, you can definitely see where the bedrock of our listener base is.
Oh, of course.
Not a lot of diversity among people who actually listen to podcasts about trolls, despite our glowing personalities, of course. That being said, I have been hesitant. I've got 3 games to report over the last couple of weeks, and I still have not had a chance to go and do it. But I'll get you some good data in there, Fraser.
Please do.
There's a loss even. Ooh.
Ooh, yeah. Well, and again, because we've got the most trolls get the most games recorded, we also have the most loss recorded and have the most realistic win percentage, which is always nice to see as well.
Yeah, I was definitely surprised with how much information was included into the battle reporter when I did it. It was like quite the survey, and I was really surprised. I was thinking like, is this going to be who won, how many points? But I mean, it asked a lot, and I was pleasantly surprised.
And it's sort of a double-edged sword with that, because the idea is I wanted it to be so people wanted to put the information that's valuable, like the different win situations, who your caster was, things like that. But you have to be careful not asking for too much so people just don't submit anything. So it's sort of have to walk that fine line. So I think it's at a good place. I mean, a lot of the questions aren't mandatory, which is good, so you won't get frustration, just people just not doing it at all. But I'm hoping once we get, and to be honest, even at 2,000 reports, we still need more data to be able to make it to see good trends coming out of it, especially with some of the other factions where we're only seeing less than 100 games reported. We're not seeing much out of that, so it's kind of hard to compare it. And once we get to that good bulk of data, like I'm thinking when we get about 5,000 altogether, then we can start looking at caster versus caster, as opposed to just caster versus faction, what we've started doing with the trolls, which I've posted a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, once the data starts to come in, it's going to be a lot easier to actually make a reasonable analysis and sort of get a picture of what the meta looks like for trolls.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you see this a lot. I don't know if either of you are very familiar with MOBA games, where there's a large number of games being played, and much like War Machine and Hordes, there's a lot of really interesting statistical data that you can draw from to make the right choice in hero that you play or team composition that you do. And the same thing can be said for this. Once we have a large footprint of data based on what we've gathered, we can actually say, all right, here's what we can safely say is good to bring into X matchup or X forecaster or anything like that. it's going to give us a really interesting snapshot into how trolls can actually fare and what they're good at in the meta.
It's also going to be interesting to have information that's actually like representative of the actual populace that's playing. With such a low number, it's hard to get, accurate data just because you're representing such a small bit. But if we could get more people to, get in there, then you're going to definitely have better data and show something that's more, representative of the greater area.
Yep. And that was one of the reasons I added that sort of community metacode option where people could track their own games locally and then take a look at the raw data and be able to strip all their other results out. So if you've got a fairly active community that's willing to report their games, you can get everyone, or even if you delegate someone who tracks them, like in a Journeyman League, you can take a look and see how the Journeyman League stats work out by using the tool as well. So there's a lot of flexibility. And again, and that's actually one of the points too, is one of the concerns that was raised in one of the comments was that the thought that this may lead to people wind up not necessarily net listing, but realizing, okay, this is the list that wins the most games, so I'm going to play just this list. But I think this tool, this data is going to give you even more opportunities to see, okay, this caster is strong, but maybe I can make some tweaks and put my own spin on lists that are doing well and get even better at it. So I don't think it's going to narrow us down to 2 or 3 lists like I know a few people have commented. If anything, I think it hopefully will allow us to expand our lists a little bit more by seeing what's strong into different factions and different casters.
I think you also have to look at the idea that once you start having that information where you can see where trends are, where people are playing a certain list, then it's going to allow people to know what they need to tech against. So then I think in the long run, you could actually, like in the short term, it might become an issue just because, more people are going to have access to that. But when you look at the long term, more people are going to have the information they can look at and see, this is what's being played. So I think it's actually going to balance it out because, people are going to have the information needed to tech against it.
So how much of this do you think is going to be affected by like I don't know if it's the right way, but the internet sheep, effectively. Like, you see X already well-known troll player does well with X list, and then that completely fucks the meta because everybody skews in that direction because they're like, hey, he built this great list, I'm going to play it too. I mean, we saw it with Runes of War, and we even saw it with other lists than Runes of War beforehand. Though, I don't know, that list was too good in so many ways that it probably had an even more polarizing effect, but I feel like there's still a good amount of influence from the internet just because of good players doing well in events with trolls.
I call it the Jay Larson effect.
Yep, true.
He's just such a good...
Let's be honest.
Right. But the thing about it is that Jay Larson, it seems recently, when Flanzer played, he had such a good list, and it was so solid that it was just that one list. But when you look at, Jay, he's able to take maybe a list that someone else suggested or someone else has talked about and pushes it to the max. And because he's such a public figure, more people are able to get access to it. Like, I know when I first started and I wanted to know about, hey, runes, like I'm hearing all about runes, it took me quite a while to actually find that information, where Jay is very much the opposite. Like, he's such a public figure that information is very accessible, so, you can get it, and I feel like more starting players like to look for that information, and I definitely think that I don't think it's going to cause that, but you're definitely going to be able to see for sure where that it's happening. Like, it's gonna be an obvious. It's going to be proof that hey, this new list is coming out. How many people are doing this? How quickly it's spread.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's just going to be a good tool to use to analyze the data, and that was kind of the intent anyway. But
yeah, exactly.
We'll see. Right now, though, I think it's pretty clear for at least most of us with play experience, though, that trolls are in a really, really good place across the board.
Agreed. And just one last thought on that. The interesting about this reporter as well is you can see that these new lists or the sort of the net lists are being played, but because people list out their skill level and their win-loss, you actually see some of these sort of net auto-win lists are losing because they're being taken by people that just aren't familiar enough with the way the lists are supposed to work. So it's interesting that you can see that side as well. Just because something's a net list doesn't mean it's automatically going to win all the games.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's really good.
Are we ready to move on then?
I am good.
Sweet. All right, so as you may have seen the third pretty face on this particular podcast today by Devon, we brought him here for a very specific reason. Now, back at Lock and Load in June, Devon brought all of his gloriously blue and red trolls, very similar to my own, to play in the Iron Arena. And during that point, you got Master Craftsman. Is that correct?
I did. I won 2016, the last Master Craftsman they're going to ever run for the hardcore side of the tournaments.
Very nice, very nice. And what's actually kind of entertaining is that you beat out another Hand Cannon Online alum, Mr. Timothy Black, who had his glorious-looking white convergence, if you do remember seeing that there as well. You two were the last two in the running, and you edged him out, so good job, buddy.
We actually sat down, and him and I had a long talk, and he came up. I hadn't even realized that they had even done the judging yet, and I guess he had found out right before me, and he came up and nicest person in the world, just was like, hey man, congratulations, and I hadn't even been notified yet. He was actually the first person to kind of let me know, and he was just so, and I was really surprised because he had such a really good scheme, and with Converge, it's really easy to make things that are very uniform, and so his army looked as one moving factor, and I don't know, it was definitely something to check off a bucket list for me, which made me really happy because I had set my goals on it this time last year when I participated at Nova. The Nova Open for Master Craftsman, and I actually got beat out by another really good friend of mine. So,
yeah, Tim's definitely a very gracious guy. He's one of the nicer guys, probably the nicest guy on the Hand Cannon cast for sure. A great painter, a great hobbyist, but we're here to talk about you. So, give us kind of a rundown of the list you ran, and then kind of go over the article in no quarter.
One of the things, so when the Mountain King came out, I was so excited because it's absolutely one of the prettiest models I've ever seen, and I was so excited for him releasing that I got him, I pulled him out of the box, I fit him for a base, I built his entire base, and then he sat on a shelf for 2 years. His base completed, but he just sat there, at least base colors, and one day, I just decided I wanted to finish it. It just became a personal goal for mine to get him completed for the Nova Open. So I started playing games with him. I finished him up, and I was playing so many games with him that people were always laughing at me because they were just like, "Oh, you're playing the Mountain King. There's better options. He's a point sink," and I didn't care. He just looked so good. I just wanted him on the table. And then the Friday that I went to Nova Open, they released the errata where he got assault. So it gave me all the people were like, oh my gosh, he's such a good model now. But he was kind of the basis of why I started the list. My list was Doomshaper 1 with the Rune Bear. It was Mulg, converted Mulg the Ancient. It was the Mountain King. And I think those were the only two. Yeah, those were the only two war beasts. And then I had Janissa, the full max unit of Fen Blades with the Kithkar and the UA. I had a converted Feralgeist. I had the Swamp Gobbers. Oh, and I had a Fellcaller. And I just was tried to include something from each part, each unit, other than a battle wagon, because I figured the Mountain King filled that up. So I just tried to do something different for each one. And going into the the Hardcore Award at Lock and Load, I intended to not win a single game. I was like, I don't care. I'm not here to win games. I'm here to have a good fun time, meet people, and just attempt to get Master Craftsman. And you ask anybody in my meta, like I had told everybody for like a year, like that's what I was doing, that's what I was going for, and I went to painting classes, and that's just kind of that was kind of like my goal. And thankfully, on top of winning Master Craftsman Best Painted Army, I also won most of my games. Lost to Andy Podell and his crazy one-shot list, Retribution. That was disgusting. It was. I'd never seen that list before, and people just kept talking about it. And I think we got to the semifinals, and that's where he beat me. And nicest person in the world, honestly. He's just such a cool person. Like every person I played that entire day was just, honestly, just so cool. And that speaks a lot for Lock and Load. But no, my major focus when I went with my trolls is I had painted orcs a long time ago, so I had painted a lot of green, so I wanted to stay away from the color green. So I went with red and blue just because they're primaries. And that's, as I've gotten better, I've just kind of improved it. But I think the thing that everybody loved the most about my models is my bases, which are the one thing that I actually take the most pride in, just because I have I kind of go with this. All my bases are decorated with a death to circle motif, which is kind of like it's like a homage to me getting my ass handed to me for an entire year by one of the people who taught me how to play. So
I should take that to heart. The guy who taught me the game, who handed my ass to me for the first year, was a Legion player. So
yeah, it definitely sticks in your head. It was one of those things, like every week I would bring a list and I was like, okay, I got it. I know how to beat Kruger. And then it'd be like, oh, now we're going to play Chromac. And then Chromac jumps over and kills me, and it's a whole nother bucket of bullshit.
Well, it seems like you actually have quite a sense of accomplishment over the whole thing, and I commend you. For a long time when I first started playing, I had a dream to play fully painted, have a really nice painted army, and when I started painting, I was not good at painting, but I got a lot of stuff done. And then after a while, I started changing techniques and learning new stuff, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, all of this old stuff is going to look like very dated in comparison to all of my the newer things that I've learned how to do. So I ended up then stripping literally half of my army, half of the painted models, or half of my entire army with the painted models all got stripped, and then I started repainting. So it's been a rather Herculean task, and not something that I've been particularly good at, but having a goal, like having one specific list that you really want to focus on, is something that I think listeners can really take away as a positive place to move.
Yeah, and I mean, once you get a lot of those main pieces completed, once you get a lot of those main pieces completed, then it's really easy to fill in spots. So I got Janissa done, and she's a solo, so she fits into a lot of places, and now it's actually been very beneficial. Yeah. Now it's been super beneficial for me, because moving into Mark III, the list that I put together now, it's I look at them and I only have 8 models I need to paint across the entire range to put into those lists. So I definitely say that if you enjoy a list, play it to the absolute maximum and work on it, and then just start working on other things, and you'll realize that it goes a lot faster, especially when you're putting when you set a goal for yourself, a timeline. I think that was actually my biggest factor. I get really easily distracted by things between video games and secondary things. So being able to actually set a goal for myself, as in Lock and Load, made things a lot easier for me. So I mean, that's one of the biggest suggestions I can give to people, is set yourself goals, but you want to make them realistic. Don't tell yourself, hey, I'm going to have a 50-point army painted in, a month, because, I mean, for me, that's not realistic, So I'm I'm going to paint a model, or something, and if it happens to be a little bit more, then that's great. And if it's a little bit less, well, shit happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at a certain point, like, if you're trying to go, like, for an above tabletop quality, I mean, the time investment on a model is not insignificant. Like, it's quite long. I mean, if I'm looking to paint something to the level that I expect a lot of my things to be now, I'm basically sitting down with a model for close to 8 hours just to make sure that I get it to the level that I want it. And that's before I even take into account basing, which is probably one of the things that takes you the most amount of time.
Personally, it's the thing I enjoy the most. Like, I think, like, I love painting, but, like, I get absolutely giddy when it comes to the actual basing aspect of it. And that's just one of the things I love about it. And to touch on an earlier subject we were talking about, yeah, one of the things that really kind of kicked my butt is when I participated at Nova last year, I had gone and I had sat down for some classes with some master painters, and they taught me so much interesting stuff that I looked at all of it and I was like, all of you are garbage. And I spent the last year like going back and like having to, you know, I wouldn't let myself like strip them because I wanted them to be representative, kind of like my growth. But I mean, I spent a lot of time on like using some of the new techniques I learned to go back over them, so I definitely feel you on that when you've painted the same model 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, it's definitely daunting. Go ahead, Fraser.
And I just said I saw this exact same thing when I was because I started playing orcs as well and moved into trolls. And the first few trolls I've played, it's like, okay, paint looks okay, and then I've gone back and looked at them, and it's amazing the growth you can see even after like 6 months of regular painting. So even if you don't think you are a good painter, look at the stuff you started with, and that'll inspire you to keep going and improving as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't, I don't know. And painting's one of those things where like, and to quote a really good painter that used to do hobby stuff for hand cannon, if anybody remembers who Ghoul is, for him, he's a master craftsman painter. He is so amazing. But his adage was like, look, I love this stuff, and the way that I get as good as I do, and with as much as I actually manage to get done, like the ritual is during the week I sit down and I paint for no less than 1 hour a day. And when you think about that and you understand the progress that you can get done on a model, that's not a bad thing to adhere to. You're not really committing a whole large portion of your day. You're taking a second to decompress. You're there working with that model, and then after an hour, you've got a little bit of progress done, and you can go about the rest of your day.
My goal is 15 minutes. Like, for me, like, I know it doesn't sound like a whole lot. Like, it's like, oh, what can you do in 15 minutes? But I've learned that if I promise myself I'm going to sit down for 15 minutes or 20 minutes and just work on something, it always ends up being longer. But keeping it in my mind that's saying, oh, you know, well, it's only 15 minutes, I actually sit down and I actually get stuff done. And as I said, most of the time it ends up being longer. But if, you know, you think every time you work on a little bit, that's one more piece you don't have to do in the future. You know, like you've finished. It's just like stepping stones. And that's one of the things, like a lot of the people that's in my meta now that ask me for a lot of painting advice, I always just tell them, you know, just take your time, you know, and as long as you put a little bit of time every day, you're going to see improvements, you know, and that's really exciting.
And that actually,
Yeah.
to say that's actually what I've been doing lately as well. Is I'll just sit down and do a highlight on some of the belts. Like I've been working on these fen blades for I think like a month now. So I'll get the base coat on the red on the tartans done. Then I'll do some highlighting. Okay, I'll spend 10 minutes and just do a highlight on the belts, and then realize all the stuff I missed the first time and go back and do it again. So yeah, every little bit helps, even if it's only a little bit of time. At least you're moving forward on them.
And trolls are deceptively simple looking when you get them, and then you realize that you pick up this one fen blade, and he's got like a keg and a cup and a fucking ham or something that's like on the back of him. Like there's just shit you don't expect on these models. Like, why the fuck is he carrying a ham? Like, what is going on here? That was one of the things that gave me the biggest kick about painting a blitzer, or not a blitzer, but a bouncer. Was he literally has a ham on his back belt, and I'm like, I don't know how to paint a ham. What the hell am I doing?
When I first started painting trolls, the old metal Axer was the first model I ever painted for the entire range. And that model like a lot of people have said, hey, you should go back and touch it up, or you should strip it, and I won't, because it's kind of like that was like where I started, and so I look at him and I'm like, man, I've come so far. But he has that little whelp that's in his back bag, and I spent so much time on that, like painstakingly, like just sat there and worked on him for so long, and now I look back on him and I'm wondering, like, why is that there? My most current kick in the ass lately has been, I've been working on Trollkin Sorcerer, and you want to talk about a model that has so many extra little bits. Like, you're like, oh, it's just going to be skin and some leather, and then you're like, no, it's skin, leather, scrolls, box, other stuff.
And that's what makes them so good, though. I mean, they look gorgeous. I mean, it's a challenge to paint at time. It's not a quick army to paint. But your comment about the first model you painting was the Axer. I did the same thing. I picked up the battle box. First one I completed was the two Impalers, but I actually, because I was insane at the time, did a painting tutorial. When my painting tutorials follow much along the lines of Marge Simpson's piano teaching. I stay one lesson ahead of what I'm trying to teach, just so I can teach myself, then record it, then teach myself, then record it. So, but it's amazing how nice those models are. And I'm actually kind of surprised that people still go back and watch that video.
Yeah. Coincidentally, though, with Devon there, the Axer was literally the first model that I picked up and decided I'm going to paint this model. And just like you, I spent an inordinate amount of time on that little pig in the back there because I was like, why is this little fucker sitting down in the back of the backpack here? Like, I don't understand. The Axer has a fanny pack, it just happens to have a whelp in it. What the shit?
I thought it was a ham. That's what made me think of it, is when I first painted it, I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is going to be a ham. And then I was like, nope, this ham has eyes. Like, this is definitely something else. And, yeah, it was such a great model. And now he sits and he stares me in the face, and it's always funny because I still prefer to put him down on the table. I'm currently, one of the models that I am working on is the new Axer from the new battle box, but I put down him, and a lot of people say, like, hey, you should update him because he's just so much different than the rest of my army. But, it's just always good to see because, when he's beside everybody, he looks like the big, ugly, hulking monster that he is.
Yeah, that model had a lot of gravitas, a lot of personality about it. I really like it. I still use it. I don't use the new Axer. Like, I prefer the old one.
Agreed. I think
we've... What? Go ahead.
I think the face sculpt is really what puts me off on the new one. I don't mind the pose, but the face just doesn't have that same look and feel as the original models did.
No, they look too, like, I don't know, ogre-ish, those new models do. I don't really like them that much. Thankfully, I have 4 metal impalers, an Axer, and a metal bouncer. So, yeah, if anybody wants some metal impalers, I think I'm already on the hook to Dan for at least one of them. So, I'll send somebody an unassembled metal impaler. But we have rambled on, I think, enough about this particular thing, but we're going to move on to yet another hobby section. Now, since you have so specifically talked about how much you love basing, I'm going to go ahead and let you lead this segment here, Devon. Tell us about what you like to do to sort of elevate your game when you're making bases.
So one of the biggest things that I can suggest to people when making bases is have a storyline. I feel like when I'm painting and I start working on bases, like I have a storyline in my head. Like I have this whole epic battle between Trollkin and Circle happening in this like ruined forest, and that's kind of what's like pushed me along. So like all of my bases share that theme. So there's like little pieces of Circle, like I've got Getorix's horn, parts of like Wolflord Morag, casters. I think there's parts of Wormwood. I have Fire Eaters who are setting Gallows Grove on fire. My War Wagon is actually busting through an old Circle shrine, and it's got Getorix's head on the front of it. So I mean, little stuff like that excites me, but I think that's just like one of the big areas to start is actually like develop a story for like your army. I mean, we spend all this time learning all of the lore and information about each character, and then when we put them on the table, it's just kind of like we're going with whatever is being told to us. So, I tried to develop that a lot, and also, try and use a little bit of everything. Like, make them taller. Grab bits and bobs of things. Like my fiance, I'll pick up sticks, and she'll be like, "What are you doing with that stick?" And I'll be like, "Oh, I'm taking it home for basing," or I'm like carrying around boxes of rocks or pieces of wood or little things like that. And it's all stuff that I intend to at some point apply to a base in the future. Three of the things that I can suggest to anybody that I feel like any person who wants to push their basing to the next level is it's a polymer clay called Super Sculpey. It's like, I think, $10 at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And it's like children's clay, but you can easily like sculpt it into things. And one of my favorite things to do is I flatten it out, and I will cut out circles, and then I just draw on the circles with like a sculpting tool or like a pencil, and I just put runes, and then I bake it, and then after I bake it, I put it into a bag, and then I beat the shit out of it, and then I have all these random bits that look like ruins. And you can do that with anything. I know my Mountain King, if anybody's seen the last No Quarter, I think it's 67, the pillar that's done on my Mountain King and all of the falling like rocks, that's all Super Sculpey. For like really natural looking, like actual like ground rocks, I use landscaping mulch. They're called bark chips, and I use small and medium bark chips, which is about $3 for about a 20-pound bag. So if you can get some friends in your local meta to like all throw in 50 cents and get a big giant like cup, I use those so much. That's one of the things I've learned in the last year, that I used to use cork. Cork was my go-to, and now it's all about bark chips.
And conveniently free in most parks in Southern Ontario.
And I'm actually kind of at that state of evolution where you were, that I've started experimenting with cork. But one of the things that I've noticed, though, is like, so trolls tend to have this like very static nature to them in their poses, right? So they're pointing or standing or holding their weapon, or doing a lot of non-active things. I think the first sculpt that really did something super active was probably the new Gristle one, where she's actually literally running. Yeah, exactly. Gunny's pointing. He's pointing. So one of the ways that you can sort of break up all of those natural like right angle lines that you can do with trolls is to create a base where they're slightly angled up or slightly angled down based on what their position is. So, for instance, since I gave Dallas a Kithkar, I decided I needed another one at this point. So what I did instead was create a Fenblade Kithkar. Now, as you can see, he's angled slightly down. He's a very tall model, but this gives the illusion that he's sort of moving forward rather when he's standing still and in a very static position. That doesn't seem like it's got a lot of action. And it's one of the things that I've just recently started doing with a lot of the models that tend to not have a lot of sort of movement in their pose, and it really helps change the dynamic of the way it looks on the base.
Agreed.
Mike's close.
As I say, so we all wait. That was a dramatic pause.
Oh, Devon started talking too. His mic's closed.
Oh, okay.
No, maybe no.
All right,
there we go.
I forgot that I muted myself. But no, what I was saying was definitely don't worry about like cutting into your models. Like I know at Lock and Load, we were all sitting there and they do the big giant release and everybody's running around grabbing boxes, and I know Will Pagani and me are standing in line, and he says to me, he's like, Devon, what are you going to do with yours? You get it? You're going to try and put it together and play? And I said, no, as soon as I get that box open, I'm going to cut his arms off and reposition him. And the first thing I did when I got a hold of Ragnar is I actually cut both of his arms off and cut his hands off, and then re-sculpted him so that he was like more dynamic. So let's see if I can get this to work in this lighting. So like here we go. So like he's like swinging his hammer, and he's got like these like I don't know. Can you guys see that? I can't tell.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, so I did that, and I mean, it's just one of those things. Like try and like what you were saying, Matt, is like when you were talking about bases. Like I put my rune bear up on this giant log, and so he's like a solid inch off the ground, but it makes him seem more dynamic with you know, like with how they are. So it gives them that action pose when you're, you know, when you're looking for action.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really just sort of helps the flow. But you know, and one of the things that a lot of people just don't, people have, you know, they want to get their models done, they want to play, you know, they just put a little bit of ballast down, seal the model up, call it good. Like, just take that few extra seconds to put some flock or some static grass, just those little details like you were talking about earlier that really make a base stand out. Like, I, just like you, I'll often go out into my yard, into the gravel on my driveway, and just look for interesting stones to just pick up and use for the model. I mean, it's the little authentic details there that can be super interesting and actually just make that model pop just that bit more.
I do the same thing too. It drives my wife crazy with me going and picking up bits and bobs off the ground. So, but I have to admit, I'm guilty of one of the, you know, a little bit of ballast. I do use a little bit of static grass and I'll occasionally throw a small rock there. But I typically don't go whole hog because I know I don't have a lot of time and I'd rather focus on the painting. I may eventually rebase them when I get to that point. But I do. But you're making a theme in your list. One of the things I've done, just more to annoy my sons than anything else, is because there's a lot of torn cloth on some of the war beasts. I typically will paint. I'll paint the cloth to look like either banners that they've taken from Signar or Khador, and that way the trolls have beaten them up, and now it's protecting the Mountain King's butt is being covered by a Khador flag. So little things like that. So you can still add the theme, but not necessarily have to do it on the base.
Yeah, one thing I definitely say to a lot of people, anybody who uses like static grass and just sets it down, a huge thing that actually will take your base, you know, a very basic base from like a 5 to like an 11, is just get some grass tufts. Or like grass tufts are just like a different type of, I know all the companies like Secret Weapon and a lot of other people, they offer like little bits and bobs that you can get that just are like in a container, and they could be like little rocks or flowers. Just adding like that little bit of like a grass tuft here or like a flower that breaks up the monotony of just like pure grass. It's fantastic of what it can do.
Have you ever?
Yeah, absolutely.
So say, have you ever seen there's a company in I believe Spain called I think a Green Stuff World. They have this roller where it actually will roll out you can get texture bases. So instead of buying the resin bases, basically has a roller with the pattern. You roll it over green stuff and then place it in there. So they've got like ruins, they've got like sort of like a marshy area, things like that. So those are another option too. If you're not creative, but you still want to have something and not necessarily have to be buying resin bases, this is a way to get an alternative. And they're not. I guess I'm already pitching for this company, so I'll keep going. They're like $10 for the roller. You can get or 6 of them for like $36 US, which seems like a good deal because you have endless bases that won't be all identical, and you can do a fairly good sized army based on that as well. If you're not one for building from scratch.
Yeah, that seems really awesome. I think I do remember seeing something like that on social media a little while back.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of avenues to really make your bases pop.
There's a company I recently found, and I would feel bad if I didn't mention them. They were called, it's called Happy Seppuku, and they do these like silicone base stamps. And I think for this, they have like 30 different types you can get, and they do like cobblestone, bricks, board, and I think I paid $6 to $10 for this, and I did a friend's entire army just using these, and they're fantastic. And you know, you just put like a little bit of green stuff on the base, you stamp it, then you paint it, and green stuff's so easy to drill into that you know, pinning your model to it, it's super simple. So I feel you on the you need something quick and efficient. You know, base stamps work.
It sounds like the same concept.
I agree 100%.
Oh, there we go.
All right, guys. So I think we've also tallied or stayed on this one a little long. Lastly, I think we were going to talk about some Doomy 2 list dojo. However, I think probably some real life list experiences recently. Since I know, Fraser, you've played some games recently. I've played a game. I played a pretty good game recently. Why don't we go over some quick battle report stuff and talk about some lists we were doing? Go ahead and take it away, Fraser.
So I've been playing my Doomy list that I'm taking to the Team Canada WTC fundraiser event on August 27th. So that's our list is Guns and Trollses. I'm bringing I'm bringing Gunbjorn and Madrak, but I've been playing almost exclusively Gunbjorn because I finally am playing him. Never played it in Mark II, playing him now in Mark III. So I've had 3 games in the last 2 weeks. I'm 2-1 with him. First game was a landslide top of 2 assassination against poor Hunter's Grim. He didn't quite realize the range and the risk of the combination of the knockdown with the war wagon, and then just throwing everything else at him. So Grim was not happy with that one. And then my second game, which is I'm going to call out to the I'd like to see maybe we can do a group think on this one if we have time, either today or maybe on the Facebook page. Second list was against Kador. It was Harkovich, and it was I think 11 heavy jacks. And man, that was not fun. It was brutal. It was I think he had 4 decimated, the ones that can do the pushback, the 2 piston arms. Had 4 of those, 2 juggernauts, a rager. I think he had a Kodiak and a few other things. I couldn't get through enough of it. And I couldn't knock him down because I couldn't get to him, and if I knocked him down, he still had shield guard. So there wasn't much I could do for an assassination, and my list didn't have enough to deal with them. And then my game I played last night was against the Scorn, against the fat guy on the little baby elephants. I forget the guy's name.
Rasha.
Thank you. And that one we actually had to call on time because we didn't play under clock, and we had hit 2 hours, and the game just wouldn't have ended. That was a bit of a grind fest, but he didn't take into account Gunny's feat because he brought a very shooty list. So I basically locked him out for a turn, managed to get in. He put some pretty heavy damage into my Glacier King, but we had rolled out an assassination run for my next turn, and the way we rolled it out without actually moving the models, but it looked like it could have been an assassination there. So, but I was a little put off just because I know that Rashfith has steady, and he had impervious flesh. So my normal knock him down and shoot him didn't think I had good odds on that. But it was an interesting game, and both Robert and I enjoyed it. And for those if you're curious, all 3 of them were home machine games, so you can watch the stream online if you want to see them. But overall, loving Gunny, having lots of fun with him, still learning how to use him properly, but he's lots of fun and looking forward to playing him in the tournament.
Very nice. I'm glad to see Gunbjorn getting some love finally. It's actually, I think it's just his time. Like, I feel like he got the improvements he needed to make him a truly viable warlock in our stable, and I'm looking forward to playing him more. My most recent game was a Hunter's Grim game, and the list rolls out as such. It's Hunter's Grim, Runebearer, Dozering Smig, Impaler, Warwagon, Fellcaller, Stonescribe Chronicler, Fenblades and UA, Trollkin Sluggers, full unit, and a minimum unit of Fire Eaters. Sluggers, you say? Who plays those units? I don't know. Anyway, so I played against a Circle player, was playing against of all Warlocks, Chromac 2, with Getorix, a Stalker, and then a Feral Warpwolf. Unit of the Skinwalkers, and then the full unit of Tharn Ravagers, the guys who get souls, and the Alpha, as well as a unit of Shifting Stones with the Stonekeeper. God, I'm dying here.
When you pulled down those sluggers, was there like an imprint on your shelf of where they were from like the last
there
many
might
years?
have been combos, just saying. That unit actually has a pretty storied history because they were gifted to me by a friend because I was intrigued by them. And then when I got the unit, it turns out that the one that's kneeling down, his back leg was just gone. Like, it was literally not there. It had broken off before it even hit the packing. And so they didn't get used again for freaking ever. And then I finally went to Privateer Press and I was like, hey, I need another one of these guys replaced. I just got it and it doesn't have its leg. So they got that, and then they finally got used lock and load 3 years ago. And they got pulled out again with Hunter's Grim in Mark II, and I left Terminus top of 2 with 1 box and on fire in my first game of Masters. And Sluggers did most of that damage. So they were good to me, and then I lost that game, and then I never played them again. So they did sit for quite some time. But in this last game, I have to say that as a second wave and as a flanking unit, if you can get them in a place where they can get clear sight lines, the D3 shots is excellent. Pair that with mortality, and if you can get them to stand still, they will take a freaking heavy off the table with a little bit of debuffing and some high rolls on those D3 shots. That being said, you need to make sure that your list has some way to keep them alive or keep them unengaged. Like, mine didn't work even late into the game. Like, I had a guy my opponent effectively used his Warpwolf Stalker. He came in, killed a bunch of models, used Lightning Strike, and then moved to engage some of my sluggers. Well, he only got 3 out of the whole unit. The rest of that whole unit, though, almost entirely eliminated all of his backline support. Like, I was able to put good shots down range on crucial targets that needed to. And, piece de resistance, 1 slugger did the last shots on Chromac to finish the game. So it was a really, really fun game. Hunter's Grim are legit right now, too. So, almost all credit to my battle group, though. Like, you can take just a straight-up Warp Wolf, even if they warp for strength, if you can walk up, mortality, shoot with Grim, or mortality, knockdown, shoot with Grim, shoot with Dozer and Smig, and the hand cannon, and then reposition. Like, you almost take out an entire Warp Wolf in 1 turn, and then they can't retaliate because you're too far away. You're outside of their 11-inch threat range with that. So, it's a pretty good package. Throw the War Wagon in there, it's a good list. I had a lot of fun. And honestly, this was the first game in the entirety of that I played Mark III now that the War Wagon did not hit above its point level. Like, it was only slightly lackluster, but still got me key kills for the game. So, super, super fun. Loving Hunter's Grim, and it's basically between those two that I'm going to be pairing with Madrak 2 going forward. Devon, you got any lists that you're working on right now, buddy?
My list right now is I went with a skew list, but not your usual defense or armor skew. I went with a knockdown skew. So I've been trying to play Ragnar more, just because he's new, and I told myself that I was going to set myself at 2 casters for the first 6 months of this year, and for the first 6 months of Mark III, and I told myself it was going to be Ragnar, and then it was going to be Madrak 2. Just because I was playing him a lot in Mark II, and I wanted to see what the switch was in Mark III, I am pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, he's kind of a double murder machine now.
Yeah, he's amazing. But you're going to see another fan favorite in here, but I'm playing Ragnar Sky Splitter, the Rune Bear, Mountain King, and Rock, which Rock with Pulverizer is disgusting. I pushed a Warp Wolf, I think it was 5 inches, and I killed 15 units, soldiers with him, and then finished off the caster. So Rock, pretty legitimate with Pulverizer. The War Wagon, a unit of Troll Whelps, Feralgeist, Janissa, Dunia Knot, min unit of the Creelstone with the Elder. And the whole point of this list is I have 6 potential ways to knock you down, and the Feralgeist is basically kind of like, if I don't knock something down in a regular manner, the Feralgeist is like a homing beacon. And then I basically can clear a 10-inch a 10-inch long by 4-inch area of models that are knocked down by just continuously hitting the model that's at the farthest end of the one I just knocked down. And usually I can get to your caster, and then if 2 assault sprays from the Mountain King or the Pounder don't kill you, then the Rune Bear throwing out Ragnar's knockdown usually does. So I've just been kind of playing around with that. I love the War Wagon. I cannot begin to express how happy I am with its current iteration in this edition, and it makes me so happy that I own 2.
Right? I am looking into getting a second one. They're so good right now. Like, the potential that it has to simply just kill so many infantry, in addition to how much punishment it can put down on lights or heavies, like, you can almost kill a heavy with the damn thing. And they're going to have a hard time killing it in return if it's under the stone. So, such a great model. Has great presence on the board. Plus, it's one of those things that can only be pushed. So, yeah, that makes it a lot easier to have a sticky point in the zone, and then also something that you can use to just ignore terrain too. So, great model. I actually really like the list design.
Yeah, it's so fun just because of the whole being able to shoot after you trample, and now with the way that trample works, I'm not is it trample? No, impact attacks. It's the way the impact attacks work now in this edition. Like since you get to do all your attacks before you actually turn to face, like you can get there and then do so much damage with that wide arc, and then you turn to face, and it's like you've basically cleared this 180 area, maybe a little bit more with him, and then still shoot. It's fantastic. I love the War Wagon so much.
Yeah, I really hope we see more of those in play. I think they're going to be excellent. And don't forget, too, like the War Wagon's built-in knockdown tech is so good because of trampling hooves. Like, your impacts automatically come in with Line Breaker, and then it's like, oh, 3 dice, you're knocked down, sucks to be you, and now I get to get my charge attack auto hits, and then you also get the boosted on all the impacts, and then you can just shoot the damn thing. It's engage with you, just shoot it with the Pounder. Who cares? The blast damage isn't going to hurt you.
I did that in Mark II. I was sure I was going to make the War Wagon work, so I was running it with Jarl in Mark II, and I was charging, hitting, knocking down, shooting the model in front of me, and magic bulleting back to the caster.
Nice. I like it. Well, gentlemen, we're right up to the end of our normal running time here. We've had a pretty productive discussion. Devon, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed myself.
Absolutely. Fraser, thank you for orchestrating everything and doing all the work so I don't have to do it anymore.
You're more than welcome.
Yeah, he accepts it. All right. And on that bombshell, this has been the Scrumcast. Signing off.
And that's the end for Danny. The only thing I want to throw out for those watching this on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, as it helps with all the voodoo magic in the background. If you're watching this on Twitch, make sure that you like as well, and comment, and I think that's all the spiels I have to do. There we go. So now I can stop the recording. So
I like it, Fraser. That was very